Greetings, One Dao Academy warriors and all global Wing Chun enthusiasts. TJ here with another Internal Arts download. In this video, I would like to break down and begin to explore the fundamentals of letting go. Not just as a psychological concept, but as a functional internal skill. And one that directly affects our structure, energy, and our spontaneity in movement. One of the first realizations I had when I dove into the concept of letting go is that physical tension is rarely just physical. What we call tight hips, tight shoulders, tight chest are often expressions of emotional holding of some sort. Historically repressed, suppressed, or consciously clung to upset that is become crystallized into our being, into our body. Now, that type of holding isn't only restrictive, it's straight up inefficient. It wastes energy. So instead of labeling everything as anger, fear, resentment, bereavement, anxiety, we in the One Dao Chun San Tin lineage of Wing Chun more often use the term upset. Upset is a more neutral affirmation, right? And as such, a more neutral container. The moment I say, I'm angry, the moment I say something's wrong, the moment I admit I'm not well, I activate programs around these negative belief systems. You know, we're simple. It's story, identity, goes right to memory. But if I say there is upset energy present, I tend to remain closer to awareness and further from that negative identification. The Tao Te Ching says the sage doesn't accumulate. The more he gives to others, the more he has. Internally, this applies to ether, to energy. The sage doesn't accumulate emotional residue. They don't store yesterday inside of today. So, relaxation. Like real internal relaxation requires some emotional permission. Every internal art teaches us to relax, but relaxation isn't just muscular, right? Relaxation's also an emotional unclenching. Back in Module 5, we worked with the concept of sinking as a downward internal rinsing. Here we extend that same principle into the emotional body. Letting go, in effect, is kind of like emotional sinking. The first entry point is gratitude. When upset arises, our default reaction is typically resistance. We distract, we suppress, we project. But what if the first response instead becomes, I'm grateful for this surfacing? You know, it's kind of like discovering a 5 kilo stone at the bottom of your backpack while you're hiking. You could choose to be angry that you carried this boulder for hours or days or weeks or longer. Or you could just choose to be grateful you finally found it. Why? Because now you can remove it. So in Wing Chun, we train and we practice upright, right? In stance, breathing, centered, sinking. And then perhaps we bring up something that we see as upset. Not to indulge the story of that upset, but to feel the sensation of that upset. And while doing that, we practice holding gratitude in the heart. Gratitude opens space. Upset contracts space. When we overlay gratitude onto upset, we prevent the collapse. And therein comes the twist. We have to choose to feel it to heal it. But feeling it doesn't mean rehashing and rehearsing that upset narrative. We're not reliving what happened. We're sensing what's happening in our body right now. Perhaps at this moment of upset or sensing the upset, we sense tightness in the chest. We sense heat in our face or a clenched jaw, or straight up we notice a flop sweat comes on. Or maybe the upset just makes us notice that really annoying itch on that part of our back that we just can't frickin' reach. Whatever it is, one of the most known sayings in Xing Yi is, where the mind goes, the qi follows or flows. Where qi lingers, there is disease or dis-ease. If the mind rests lingering in our story, the energy begins to stagnate. But if awareness rests in sensation without the clinging, then that energy is free to move. Most of the time we believe that we're upset about a circumstance or a particular event that happened to us. But in truth, we're simply reacting to our perception of that circumstance or that event. Our story surrounding it fuels the identity. And the identity keeps our energetic container full. So when we can shift from story to raw sensation and simply observe, that's where we notice that our ethereal energy has been leaking. If left unchecked long enough, by remaining in the construct, remaining in the story, over time, that ethereal energy might empty. And then you got a situation where it's similar to the barrel of a gun with no ammunition in it, with no bullets. If the barrel's empty, the trigger no longer triggers anything. So in this sense, letting go also requires releasing our so-called victim/perpetrator mindset. As long as someone did something to me, I essentially give away my internal authority. But from the unified field perspective that we explored back in sensing energy, there's no such thing as the separateness of enemies and victims. They're simply interacting fields of energy. He who tiptoes or stands on their tiptoes isn't steady. He who displays himself doesn't shine. Clinging to identity, whether victim or the perpetrator, it doesn't matter. It destabilizes us. Whereas dropping these identities is more likely to restore the balance. Now, equally important in letting go is the practice of self-forgiveness. A common condition of not so common sense is our ability to think, well, that seemed like a good idea at the time. Humans act according to the awareness available in that moment. We do the best we can with the information that's been given to us. If emotions like guilt or shame are a part of that construct, then that upset also stores a dysfunctional esoteric charge. A charge that really only acknowledgement and acceptance of the dysfunction can release. When I was studying yoga in India, my guru shared a philosophy with me that I feel really resonates with the whole letting go process. And this theory is what I now understand to be as the triple A's of success. And the triple A's of success resonate so closely with the fundamentals of letting go that honestly, it could just as easily be called the triple A's of letting go. And what those triple A's are, as I said before, acknowledgement, acceptance, and finally, adaptation. Letting go isn't an action that we make happen. Letting go is a natural consequence that emerges when acknowledgement, acceptance, and adaptation occur organically. First, we got to acknowledge what is present honestly, without denial. Then, we got to accept its existence without resistance. Existence without resistance. Interesting. Got to write that one down. And from that state of non-resistance is where adaptation finally becomes even possible. Energy reorganizes, perception shifts, movement initiates change. In this way, letting go isn't something we force. It's something that naturally happens once reality is no longer being argued with internally. In my own personal life, being diagnosed with a chronic condition, separation from my life partner, the financial collapse of the industry I was working in, the loss of my mother, my father, and several of my closest friends, all within less than a 6-month period. Man, my grief surfaced in many, so frickin' many layers. But it wasn't my life that was causing the grief, that was causing the suffering. Life revealed to me grief that I needed to surrender. As I consciously began to explore the sensation of grief without constantly rehearsing the story, that charge of the upset within began to dissolve drastically. And finally, after one spontaneous and fateful experience of deep release, well, let's just call it what it was, a complete nervous mental breakdown. Like after that, immediately after that, I felt so much lighter. Like I literally almost felt like invincible at first. And not because I had any sort of huge epiphany, but because all that stored upset, all that stored emotional energy had finally found a way to burn off. Man, letting go isn't suppression. And it's not emotional expression really either. Expressing anger outward can still feed anger. Surrender is different. Surrender burns the charge of any upset at its root. And this leads me into the concept of acknowledging and accepting energetic or spiritual orientation. Letting go requires some direction. If I release anger, where am I moving toward? If I drop fear, what replaces it? This is where our highest intention becomes essential. Highest intention is not some abstract thing. It's who I would like to choose to be. In my case, I aim towards peaceful, loving, clear, centered. And beyond that, surrender means offering what I release to something greater than my individual will. He who grasps loses. Grasping creates tension. Tension disrupts flow. Letting go is what restores alignment. Alignment with a downward axis, sinking, and alignment with an upward axis, surrender. Downward, I feel and release. Upward, I offer and align. Between these two energetic forces, I become a conduit instead of a container. And this is how letting go becomes a way of being. It's like music. A note arises, it plays, it resonates. It fades. If it stayed playing forever, there would be no such thing as music, because there would be no silence. Life works the same way. Moments arise, they pass. Clinging to these passing moments too intensely just screws up the rhythm. In our daily Nim-Tao state training, we practice centering in our highest intention. We sink through the body. We explore bringing up our upset with gratitude. We feel the sensation, We mentally affirm, I surrender this. And we allow it to dissolve downward through the body and release upward into something greater. And boom, highest intention established. Sinking emotionally, letting go as each moment arises and fades. And with enough practice, letting go becomes as simple as observing the clouds as they pass through the sky. It's only when they pass that we're able to behold the vastness of that magnificent sky behind them. Now, from a martial perspective, this becomes increasingly critical. In combat, you can't cling to that last exchange. You can't replay that last mistake. You can't emotionally recharge that last strike. The strike happened. It's gone. The body responds from its center, or it freezes from memory. It's our emotional backlog that slows our reactions. Stored upset distorts our perceptions, whereas an empty container moves freely. There is an internal arts proverb that mentions when nothing is stored, nothing obstructs. As such, when nothing is stored, the body is unbound. When nothing is stored, our perception is clear. When nothing is stored, response becomes spontaneous, effortless. Letting go isn't precision. Letting go is natural. It's energetic hygiene. Letting go is trust. Trust that you don't need to grip life so tightly in order to move through it. Trust that what arises within can honestly be felt. Trust that what's felt can be surrendered. Trust that what's surrendered doesn't diminish you, that it actually refines you. To hold or drop anything, you have to first open your hand. When that hand opens, energy flows. When energy flows, tensions dissolve. When tensions dissolve, our true power returns to its natural state. So ultimately, letting go isn't something we do. It's something that we become. With gratitude as an entry point. Sensation as discharge. Surrender as alignment. And of course, our highest intention as our orientation, as our direction. Upset arises. You feel it. You release it. You try to remain centered and align upward. Nothing accumulated, nothing gripping, nothing defining you by your yesterday. Just awareness moving through form. Just structure animated by clarity. Just a sage who chooses not to carry what no longer serves them. And in that condition, we become lighter. We become clearer, and martially, we become far more effective and efficient. So, to sum it all up, through years of practice, reflection, and integration across several internal disciplines, this is the clearest expression I have of letting go as a functional internal skill. Not just merely an idea, but a process that reveals itself through training and deepens through lived experience. My true understanding of letting go will undoubtedly continue to evolve throughout my entire lifetime. But the path of letting go itself is now clearly marked. And naturally, it's the path to take when it best serves my being. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. I will see you in my next video on the fundamentals of seeing as an energy. Peace, love, and Kung Fu to y'all.